Hi, my name is Richelle Cohen. I'm a junior at UMass who is double majoring in linguistics and computer science. My work this semester through 5CDH has focused on proverbs and using natural language processing techniques, studying their structures for a way to determine when a sentence sounds proverbial. Outside of my majors, though, I also work as a tutor at the Writing Center, which reveals my main research interests. Where does spoken and written language intersect? In linguistics, we like to make a distinction between spontaneous and processed language. Spontaneous language is simply what comes out of our mouths whenever we hold a conversation. It is unrehearsed, it has simple grammatical structures, and it has the automatic response from the other participant in the conversation if something is not completely understood. The second, processed language, is what I'm using right now to address all of you. I have written down, revised, and practiced every single word I'm saying right now so that the information is conveyed without anyone needing clarification, hopefully. Typically, this is the difference between spoken and written language. In written language, we find the idealized conception of what language should be. Complex structures, a result of heavy processing, strong verbs, and unsplit infinitives. In Proverbs, however, we find a curious intersection of both spoken and processed language, but more on that change in a moment. So what are Proverbs anyway? Lord John Russell is attributed with defining these curious parts of speech as the wisdom of many and the wit of one. I'd like to revise this quote a little bit. Because they are said so often, Proverbs contain many poetic devices you simply don't typically see in spontaneous language. They often rhyme, a stitch in time saves 9, have meter, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, and contain parallel structures, better 2 heads than 1, along with many other features. Despite this processing, they maintain simple grammatical structures and common phrasing. We don't see words like utilize or lugubrious thrown about when use or sad will work just as well. The key difference is that proverbs are processed orally by the community, and in spoken language, we don't care nearly as much about complex words and structures filling a page as we do about conveying a message as easily as possible. As we look at proverbs through time, we can see wording changing as language changing, solving any problems related to conveying information clearly. In fact, in many points of time, competing structures existed for the same proverb before one version eventually won, so to speak. So really, when we say the wit of one, we're actually saying the wit of many. The wisdom of many piece of this quote, however, is more correct. Proverbs come in many shapes, sizes, and forms, but their one combining factor is that they share cultural wisdom. This distinguishes them from idioms, aphorisms, and a slew of other folk sayings. When I tell you about a fellowship I just applied for and how excited I am to receive it, and you tell me, don't count your chickens before they hatch, you're reminding me about a piece of cultural wisdom. I must agree with this statement because so many people saying the same thing over thousands of years couldn't possibly be wrong, could it? You therefore strengthen your argument with this added piece of cultural ethos. Now for a bit of a diversion into the mechanics of this project. In computer science, we have a model called n-grams, the n is replaced by whatever number you use, which will take training such as words, letters, amino acids, etc., and generate possible combinations of the training based on where these words, letters, amino acids tend to co-occur. So if you look at the slide, when you take the word you, all the possible options are up there, with the larger words referring to words that tend to occur more often with you. So my generator would take you and say, okay, maybe take have, and then from have go to a or any or anything like that. In natural language processing, we use this on words in sentences. So, in a corpus of English sentences, there would be a much higher likelihood of thee and mouse showing up together than thee and we. I am using a bigram model, which means that when my Python script generates these sentences, it looks at only the current word when determining what word could be added to the sentence next. In a trigram model, I would look at both the current word and the word preceding to determine what word would come next. As we move from unigram to 9gram, the sentences become more and more accurate, but the data becomes sparser. Stop me if you know what word comes next. When life hands you lemons, make... So it doesn't leave many options, even though it's more grammatical. And eventually, we run into the issue where the computer returns sentences that are reproductions of the original training data. I've been using a bigram model because not only are the sentences themselves small, but the set of all English proverbs isn't particularly large either compared to other types of training data. When I use the training, though, and this is the big question, are the novel sentences proverbs? Strictly speaking, no. Let me show you one to illustrate my point. My generator produced this sentence. Enough is soon forgotten. Do you think this sounds proverbial? Do you think you know what it means? Simple enough, I thought. It means that time passes by and everything we find important will be gone someday. Kind of bleak, but true. But when I showed it to a friend, he took it in a completely different direction, positing that, as we crave more and more things, what once was enough is the new starting point for something better. The point here is that this sentence does not belong in American culture, and therefore my friend and I have no shared understanding of what it means. If I were to use it in context, then he would probably catch my meaning, but this wouldn't resonate the way the meaning of a well-known truth might. Furthermore, plenty of sentences generated by this parser, while making sense grammatically, simply make no sense literally. For example, one novel proverb my generator returned was, "Train up its inscription." No standard American English speaker would argue that this can't be said in English, but when you think about it, it simply doesn't make sense. How do you train up whose inscription? Or how about this one? Friday, so you want woe. Maybe I'm a little biased in my belief that Friday could never cause or want woe, but you get my point. And because this project primarily deals with wordplay, here are some other fun sentences. Angry men are troubled waters. Hot love is good for a beggar's purse. Barefooted men seldom agree. Enough is soon forgotten. And wounds may have need of the air. And herein lies the crux of my research. Can the actual proverbial wisdom be separated from sentences sounding proverbial? Why does this happen? Remember when I told you that proverbs have common structures? I forgot to mention that these structures are also set in place over time. So the wording that sounds more archaic sounds wiser and therefore tends to win when structures of proverbs change. I have spent a lot of time this semester working on implementing a pre-existing grammar to check the grammaticality of my novel Proverbs, only to find that the sentences it counted as ungrammatical had a higher ratio of what I found most proverbial. In natural language processing, the closer the training set is to the actual data, the more accurate and consistent the algorithm will be. Well, as I said before, proverbs are fixed, archaic structures, for the most part, which wouldn't be very close to training from, say, the Wall Street Journal. The sentences that this grammar found proverbial were mostly simple and straightforward. Barley corn is the devil. Rome does. Sit in it. Self-praise is more busy than water. The supposedly ungrammatical sentences, however, contained a higher proportion of sentences I considered proverbial. For instance, standing pools gather filth, flowers are soon forgotten, and then some were just downright malicious. Little boats must be drowned. So then maybe this one wasn't so proverbial, unless this proverb was only used by villains in The Princess Bride. So, while proving that proverbs do contain these archaic structures, I also found that, in fact, the oldest sounding proverbs were really the ones that sounded most proverbial. And now I found the major topic I'd like to explore in my senior project next year. What linguistic devices allow us to evaluate enough is soon forgotten as more proverbial than barley corn is the devil? I am currently writing a test to find what voicing makes something sound more proverbial, and I hope that through successive trials I can concatenate a simple heuristic of what American English speakers would accept as more or less proverbial. Thank you.